Now, programming from the Illinois Channel, an independent, nonpartisan corporation formed to provide nonpartisan coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois. For more information on the Illinois Channel, please visit our website at www.illinoischannel.org.
Just ahead, we head to the House floor for a debate over the fiscal year 2018 budget. Then in about 50 minutes from now, we talk to Democrat Representative Mary Flowers and get her opinion on whether the state will pass a budget before the end of the month. Following that, in about 1 hour, Senate Minority Leader Christine Radogno holds a press conference to announce her resignation from the Senate. Then in about 1 hour and 10 minutes, we talk to State Representative Jeannie Ives about changes she would like to see in how the state assesses property values, thus impacting property taxes. And finally, in about 1 hour and 25 minutes, we sit down with John Carpenter, the president and CEO of the Choose DuPage Economic Development Alliance, about the growth in jobs and industry throughout DuPage County. That's all just ahead, after a brief word from one of our advisory council members.
Hi, I'm Bob Myers, president of the Associated Beer Distributors of Illinois. You know, there have been many increases in the number of choices of beers now available in the marketplace. Independent beer distributors offer consumers thousands of craft, domestic, and imported beers from over 3,000 breweries. Whether you're purchasing beer in a restaurant, a grocery store, or a convenience store, it's the beer distributors that make the delivery, keep track of the inventory, and ensure that the product you are buying is fresh. We're also responsible for recording how much beer is sold and ensuring that the state taxes on those sales are collected. And because we want everyone to drink responsibly, beer distributors play the central role in the three-tier system that regulates beer from the brewery to its distribution and final sale at a retail location. Working in a highly regulated industry is just one reason we also support the work of the Illinois Channel. When new laws are proposed, new taxes, or new regulations, we all need to stay connected to know how these proposals may change how we live and work. I'm Bob Myers, president of the Associated Beer Distributors of Illinois, who are proud to help keep you connected.
Next, from Springfield, we head to the House floor for a debate over the fiscal year 2018 budget. This runs about 50 minutes.
Mr. Clerk.
Floor Amendment number 2 is Operator Representative Greg Harrison has been approved for consideration.
Mr. Harris on Amendment 2.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Senate Bill 6, Amendment number 2, is the appropriations side of a balanced budget for the state of Illinois. As you know, SB 9 is the revenue portion and it has been available for your inspection. Now, we all know how dire this situation our state is in. And as I've thought about what to say today, I'm trying to think, what great speech could I give or something. There's really nothing you can say, given the gravity of what's facing us today. And we know that, across Illinois, people are watching from every corner of our state to see what we do here, if we act, and if we get our job done. So I don't want to give a political speech or a table-pounding speech. The stakes are way too high. Everyone knows it. Everyone knows today that we're standing here today staring into an abyss. We're staring into an abyss that's going to face us tomorrow morning when the clock passes midnight. It's going to engulf everything we wish to do here and stifle every important issue facing our state. Every Illinois family, business, school district, university, daycare, senior center, hospital, every first responder, every farmer, every bond rating agency, every investor, and every construction worker knows that Today is the make or break day. It's our moment to put everything else aside except the future and well-being of our state. How we'll vote today will probably be the most consequential act that any one of us makes in our lives. Every person in the state hangs in the balance. Our seniors, children, the most vulnerable, don't want to hear from us any political rants. They don't want to hear any finger pointing from us. They don't want any more blaming. No one wants to hear any excuses. No one wants to hear it. They've heard it over and over. Today, people want to see action, and they want to see us solve a problem that has hung over us for far too long. I spoke the other day with Representative Grant Worley, the gentleman from Naperville, who wanted everyone in this room to realize a significance of this state for the ability of our state to ever dig our way out of this financial abyss. He reminded me that our credit rating is one step above junk grade. Should we fail to act by midnight tonight, our failure could result in a credit downgrade that would have catastrophic effects on our state in the financial markets. And once a downgrade is taken, it may be years before we could repair the damage. Years. Our bond rating will not go back up overnight once it goes down, and people need to understand that. It will cripple our daily operations and our ability to borrow to pay down our $15 billion backlog of bills. And even worse, because of what's known as the contagion effect, and every one of us who has to go home and talk to our local units of government needs to understand this. Because of the contagion effect, your school districts, local units of government, universities, libraries, transit systems, and other people's agencies' credit ratings are going to be dragged right down with us. We don't have any more time. We can't take one more day to delay. This is what we're facing. It's bleak, it's catastrophic. And there are really two choices today. Do we drive the state over the cliff, or do we start down the road to stabilizing our finances and saving our state? I want to just briefly tell you some highlights of what is in this bill, then I'd be happy to answer any questions. Our goal in drafting this bill was to take the best ideas from other efforts that have been suggested by our caucus and the other three caucuses and the governor. We've drawn on the best ideas that came from the Senate in SB 6 and 9. We've drawn on ideas that were presented in the joint budget presented by the House and Senate Republicans. We've also listened for many, many hours in public hearings across the state to the testimony of hundreds of citizens who came to us to tell their stories, explain their situations, and demand that we take action and pass a budget. We've tried to accommodate the governor by substantially reducing spending, living within his expenditure limits, and the income tax rates in SB 9 that was the basis of the Republican plan which he supported. We spend less in our plan than the governor's introduced budget, because we heard loud and clear and understand that we need to control our expenditures. There are $2.4 billion in cuts from current expenditure levels. This year, Illinois is on track to spend $39 billion. This proposed budget only spends $36 billion. And again, it is below the governor's introduced budget. So with passing a budget, as we all know, when we take control of our appropriation process again, rather than existing under the framework of court orders and consent decrees and continuing appropriations, we will be spending at a rate that is $3 billion less than we are spending today. This proposal fully funds pension, group health, and debt payments. It adds $350 million to elementary and secondary education to fund the evidence-based model. In addition, in the area of education, we add $65 million for additional funding to the student transportation mandated categorical and increase early childhood funding by $15 million. We fund the MAP program. We increase job training for displaced workers by $16 million. There is a 5% cut to state operations and bureaucracy across the board in order to provide funding for community-based services. But to give our departments the most flexibility to manage these cuts, we're lump summing their budgets to make their lives easier in the management area. We fund community violence program to help bring down the violence we're seeing in our streets and intervene with these young people before they are harmed, before they are shot, before they end up in the criminal justice system. We fund after-school programming, summer jobs for youth, mental health and substance abuse treatment services. Capital for projects such as road and transit and bridges is all reappropriated. The Lincoln Presidential Library is funded as a standalone entity at the request of the governor. We fund fully community care programs for seniors, and this is a point where we diverge from the governor. We propose continuing the CCP program at its current levels, and we do not support the CRP program, but have indicated over and over again our willingness to work with the other three caucuses and advocates to find a solution that would responsibly control our costs and make the program affordable as the baby boom ages. We increase funding in agriculture for extension services, county fairs, and agriculture societies. Funding is increased for soil and water conservation districts. We restore welcoming centers and immigrant integration services for refugees. Addiction treatment, supportive housing, community-based supports for people with disabilities, respite care for the families raising developmentally disabled children, the epilepsy program, and the autism program are all restored. So here's where we are. According to the United Way, if we don't act today, 36% of all human service agencies in Illinois, 36% face closure within 6 months. 40,000 people with disabilities will lose services. 69,000 people needing treatment for substance abuse will be denied. 80,000 people needing mental health treatment will be turned away. 47,000 survivors of sexual assault and domestic violence will lose services. 40,000 high-risk youth will be turned back onto the streets. Every road project, bridge repair, transit improvement, and all other capital projects in the state are being shut down and mothballed as we sit here. If the clock strikes midnight tonight, 25,000 construction workers will lose their jobs. That will happen tonight. Our universities and colleges are shutting down, losing faculty. Students are fleeing to other states. Elementary and secondary schools may not open in the fall. This is where we are, ladies and gentlemen. We're proposing today a balanced budget that reduces our expenditures. The income tax and corporate income tax rates that we're proposing that will be in another bill are identical to those proposed that came to us from the Senate. We're at a very serious moment. And I hope we all understand the consequences of our actions today. I would respectfully urge your support. I would be happy to answer any questions.
Gentleman moves for the adoption of the amendment. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put a 5-minute timer on everyone, but we will not limit the number of speakers on this very, very important piece of legislation. So the first speaker is Mr. Anderson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll speak to the bill. I don't have any questions of Greg. I do have a thank you to Greg and a thank you to all of the hard work that's gone into this compromise. And I don't need to repeat the danger and the negative consequences that Greg so clearly outlined for us. But I come to you today with joy. I come to you today with joy, not with fear, not with remorse, not with hesitation. I come to you with joy because I know, and I've always said, I know the people in this room are here to do the right thing. And I know today we're going to do the right thing. We're going to save our state, and we're going to save our state together. I wore Thank you for that, but that applause is for all of us, not just for my statement. What I was going to say was I wore a purple tie today. Purple is not red. Purple is not blue. Purple is what we need to be today to get this job done. And so I, again, say I come with joy. This is the right thing to do. It's a balanced budget. We're being responsible. And I want to just reemphasize the good, not the negatives of what happens if we don't do this, because we are going to do this. I want to reemphasize the good, the things that we're going to help. We're going to reinstitute those fundings for those needed human services. We're going to fund autism. We're going to fund breast screenings. We're going to fund at-risk youth. We're going to make that happen again. We're going to stabilize our state. We're going to let our businesses grow because they know there will be a state tomorrow and the next day and the next day. We're going to make all of that happen and more. We're going to save our educational institutions. They're not going to lose their accreditation. We are going to do great things today, and I'm going to walk out of here with a smile on my face because I know we're going to do it together. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Let's do this.
Mr. Wheeler for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the sponsor yield?
Sponsor yields.
Greg, I got a call this morning from some providers who are interested in if Amendment 2 to Senate Bill 6 has any provisions that will help us get that backlog of bills paid down.
Very good question. This is an FY18 appropriation, but as you know, there are also groups talking about how do we deal with closing the gap for the unpaid appropriations for FY17, and also dealing with the pay down of the backlog of bills on which we're paying $800 million a year of interest. This is a separate piece of legislation. It came to us from the Senate as SB4. We look forward to working with all four caucuses and the governor to figure the best way to pay these back and reduce the cost burden on our state.
No, I appreciate that. I just want to make that clear. I think that was, some people are looking for that in this bill. It may not be there. There's more work to do still with respect to that issue. And secondly, Greg, is, as you know, for my entire time in this chamber, I've been advocating, first of all, a process that is prescribed by law. This is an appropriations bill. I hope that before we get to the third reading on it, we could actually go through the process of maybe adopting a revenue estimate before we actually get that process completed.
And before you sit down, I just want to be sure I may have stated something a little incorrectly. There are FY17 appropriations in this bill, so bills can start going to the comptroller, but then we have to consider also the larger case of how do we pay those bills, where does the cash come from when they arrive, which would be part of the borrowing process.
Thank you. I appreciate the answers to your questions.
Mr. Harris for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before you start the clock, if I may verify, this is an amendment. How many votes does it take to pass?
An amendment requires more positive votes than negative votes.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And on that note, I'd like to say to my colleagues in the House, this passes with a simple majority of those people voting on the question. That is not going to be enough. There have to be, if we're serious about this, 71 votes or more on this amendment. 71 votes or more, not just a simple majority. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, here we are. We're at the last day of session. Final hours, we have a couple of votes that we have to take. This is an appropriation bill. It's not a revenue bill. It's half of the equation. It appropriates roughly $36.5 billion, which is down, as the sponsor said, from the 38 plus, maybe even close to 39 billion that we're spending now due to court orders and consent decrees and all those other things that are forcing us to send out checks without appropriations. I know that many people will be voting no, and I respect every member for any vote that they take. They know their districts. I would not question them. Some may be voting no because maybe they believe that we need to do this, but their constituents have said no, no more spending, you've got to hold the line. Others may believe that we can indeed live on a $32 billion revenue base that we're bringing in now, and they believe that our expenditure should be cut to that, and that's their contention. I respectfully disagree with that. Let's look at some of our required payments. We're bringing in $32 billion. We have a $7 billion pension payment. We have group health of $1.8 billion. We have debt service of $2.1 billion. Medicaid is another $7 billion. If we want to pay for K through 12, that's what, $6.5 billion. Right there, you've added up to over $24 billion of the 32 that we're bringing in now. So I suppose we could cut the Department of Agriculture, but I'm not sure that the farmers would like that. I suppose we could cut the Department of Natural Resources, but those people who go to Cut Rock State Park and all those other parks like to have the conservation police in place. We could cut public health. We could cut state police. We could cut the Department of Transportation. But you know what? There are services that need to be provided. There's an interest group out there that says, well, just do away with the local government distributive fund. Oh, that's $1.2 billion, which I'm sure the municipal officials would be real happy with us to do something like that. So I don't like everything that's in this plan. Absolutely not. There will be something in every budget plan that someone doesn't like. But we need a spending plan that recognizes the needs of downstate, the city of Chicago, and the suburbs. I believe this plan does that. I'm not going to let our universities lose their accreditation because we don't have a spending plan in place. Sure, it's fair to ask, how did we get here? And some people will say, well, it's that Speaker Madigan who is being portrayed as evil incarnate. Some blame Governor Rauner, who probably has been extremely firm in his demands for reform. But I'll tell you something, we all, in my opinion, share the blame. We all share the blame, myself included, because we have enabled our leaders to do this. We have enabled our leaders to get to this position. And that's unfortunate that we're in the position that we are in. But now is the time to bring this nightmare to an end. Now is the time to stop quarreling and start governing. Now is the time to stop confrontation and go to compromise. The spending plan that's in front of us today is reasonable. It's one that addresses our needs. It's one that moves us forward in a responsible way. I recommend a yes vote.
Representative Jimenez for 5 minutes.
To the amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Quick question of the sponsor. Representative, will the passage of this bill here today lead to massive layoffs across state government?
No, not at all. Again, we have made some departmental reductions, but we have lump summed all the funds so that the department secretaries and directors can manage their departments most effectively. We're believing that if there are vacancies that could be maybe left unfilled for a month or two longer and help make up that difference, there is no way I see that there would be massive layoffs.
Thank you, Representative. To the bill. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank Representative Greg Harris for all the work he put in to getting us here today. I want to thank leaders like Representative Steve Anderson and many others on the other side for the work they did in getting us here today. What we have before us, because of all of that hard work in a bipartisan way, is an honest, fair, and balanced budget that cuts spending by $2.5 billion. This plan spends $800 million less than both the governor's proposed budget and the Senate Democrats' proposal. This plan funds critical services all across the board, and I'm especially supportive of this bill because of what it does for higher education. Our universities are on the brink. Many of them risk losing accreditation if we don't pass this budget today. Students are leaving our state in masses, and we are losing good, talented professors
like Dr. Nanette Petit from Northeastern Illinois University, who is here today as my guest and joins us in the gallery. And I think we should give all of our professors like Dr. Petit a round of applause for what they were able to continue to do during this budget impasse. Let's give them a round of applause. This is not a perfect plan, but it's the best plan that was developed in a bipartisan way. President Abraham Lincoln once said, "Be sure to put your feet in the right place and then stand firm." Members, this is the right place. Plant your feet right here, right now, today, and stand firm. Stand firm, Democrats. Stand firm, Republicans. You've done great work. Stand firm. Today is the day we get our state on the right track. We're going to save our schools. We're going to save our social service providers. And we're going to save the state of Illinois by voting yes on Senate Bill 6. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ives for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So there's been a lot of talk about what this budget funds. Well, let me tell you what this budget funds. This budget funds higher education that just gave the NIU past president a $600,000 bailout after he was discovered violating our procurement laws according to an OEIG investigation. This budget continues to fund that type of behavior. This budget continues to fund a Medicaid program that now has 1 in 4 Illinoisans on it and allows single able-bodied adults to stay on that program without getting a job. This budget does nothing to fund at all our back bills, which are a festering problem that needs to be taken care of. This budget also funds things that are based on your demographic group rather than based on just simply you as an Illinois taxpayer. This budget continues to fund all sorts of particular tax breaks for particular interest groups rather than a general tax system that treats all the same. This budget continues to fund a particular university that last year only had 86 students in their freshman class. That's less than I had on my middle school cross-country team. But yet we're not going to talk about consolidating higher education that is losing enrollment. This budget will fund an education program, the evidence-based model that has failed in all the other states that have attempted it. This budget does not look out for small businessmen. This does not look out for the ordinary taxpayer. This budget is a gross overspending of people's hard-earned income, going to a bloated system that we have failed to reform. This budget continues to form prevailing wage rates where if you're a laborer in DuPage County, your analyzed compensation would be over $120,000. This budget continues to fund bloated local governments through state subsidies without forcing us to reform those same systems that create the pressures on property tax owners at the local level. This budget is not our best work. This budget does not get Illinois out of uncompetitive environment when it comes to attracting business. This budget is a disaster, and this budget is the death knell for Illinois. It tells every taxpayer who's capable of moving from the state of Illinois, it's time to pick up stakes and leave. That's what this budget does. I urge a no vote.
Representative Ammons for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill, First, let me thank Chairman Harris for the great work and facilitation that he led as a member of the budget team who met for a couple months attempting to bring this to resolution. It is not the easiest thing to do to lead an effort that would ultimately have to raise the taxes to meet the needs of the state. It is not an easy job for Chairman Harris to have to run between the two chambers to try to get consensus on Senate Bill 6 from the leadership in the Senate. It's not easy to have to work across the aisle and bring the meeting of the minds together to put on this board today a proposal that will bring an end to the impasse that has caused so much harm to our state. Everyone in the state is experiencing the harm that not having a budget has produced. And Chairman Harris has done it with great dignity and stately manhood that I believe represents exactly what we are supposed to do as legislators in this House. I also want to thank our floor leader on the other side, Representative Anderson. Truly is a man of great passion and love, and I believe that in his heart he has worked diligently on this and every other bill to look out for the interests of his members and his constituents. And to the members of the Democratic Party leadership, who has done everything, I believe, within their power and authority to bring to the board today the best compromise that we can find, to address the needs of the governor that have held the budget for this long, but to address those needs through legislative procedures and process here. I thank all of our leadership for their direction. And for my members in my community, to my constituents, to the University of Illinois, who has worked diligently to come here and speak to all of us about the importance that higher ed plays as an economic engine to this state. They have contributed greatly, not only through research, but as a developing community, making sure that people have jobs in our community. I appreciate the leadership of the University of Illinois. And so today we are called at a moment in history, the moment that has never visited our state before. This moment is calling each of us to the history books today to determine where you will come down on the most important thing that we are called to do in this House, which is to pass a budget. No, it is not perfect. It is not where I believe we should be. I believe we should be spending what is necessary to provide all services, and that there are no waiting lists for child care, and that there are no waiting lists for seniors, and that we adequately fund our Meals on Wheels programs, and that every student who needs MAP funding gets it. This budget doesn't do that. But it does bring us to the middle enough that we can not only vote yes, but we can vote yes knowing that we will continue to work even after this bill passes. So, today I wore a yellow jacket because I believe it represents the sunshine that will rise tomorrow. I do believe that we have an opportunity to stand together to continue to negotiate further. We can always pass appropriations bills if this one is not right. But this is what we have today, and this is what history is calling us to, and I urge and I vote today.
Representative Wallace for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill. Yeah, these are very serious times in the state of Illinois, and for those of us who have not been privy to all the negotiations, look, we all know the seriousness that we're facing as a state. We all know the seriousness of inaction. We all come here with different perspectives on how the state should function what happens in the economy, what is the proper role of government at the state level, the local level. But for those of us who are concerned about this bill and maintenance of the status quo, we are hearing from our residents, we're hearing from our residents who depend upon state services and local services. They depend upon our social service agencies, but we also hear from those who provide a large portion of our state's tax revenue. And what they are telling us is that there are greener pastures elsewhere. They go back, many of them, just like we do, just like our families, go back generations in the state of Illinois. We are in an increasingly competitive environment globally and within our nation. And these the taxpayers, small businesses, medium businesses, and such, they provide jobs for our constituents. They contribute to the local economy. They contribute to the state economy. They contribute to the national economy. And if we don't heed the warnings that they are giving us, if we don't heed the warnings that the rating agencies are giving us about some of our structural the demands on our budget, things like Medicaid spending and pension spending is consuming an ever larger portion of our state's budget. And so it's not a matter of being cold or hard-hearted. We're looking at this picture from a 30,000-foot view. We're listening to what our taxpayers are telling us. We're looking at the math of the consumption of the overall state budget, and simply raising taxes or raising tax rates or raising taxes on things like services or the things that we all depend upon. If we're looking at the numbers and we see the consequences, my district is in Palatine. We're the north part of Cook County. There are billboards, there are banners that are just over the road to Lake Cook Road. They say, no Cook County taxes here. Now, why would that be something that a business would promote? It's because tax policy does affect behavior. It affects the behavior of individuals. It affects the behavior of larger entities like businesses. And we're not just talking about big business. We had a vote this week on edge tax credits. I was one of the people that voted no. I don't think we should be giving special breaks to special interests. I think the best tax policy is to treat everyone equally, fairly, and just make for a transparent environment so that a business with one employee or a business with 10,000 employees can thrive. And so, we have policy differences. I do believe that we should try to work in a spirit of civility. But to characterize someone or an individual as mean-spirited, I don't think that's fair. We're going to continue to have these very difficult discussions because no matter what happens today or tomorrow or next month, we still will have very, very, very difficult challenges ahead as a state. And the need for reform is being demanded by our citizens, not just because of one person's political perspective, but because if we don't, we cannot fund the other essential things that our citizens need or demand. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Ford for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the bill, I want to first thank Greg Harris for his hard work, and I also want to thank the Speaker of the House for all of the caucuses that we had. There's always talk about rank and file members not having a say, but the leader on this side really engaged all of us, and I believe that all the Democrats on this side of the aisle, rank and file members, had a say in crafting this amendment and this proposal. So I want to thank the Speaker for that and thank the budget team as well. I'm from the west side of Chicago, many of you know, and we need this passage of this bill. We need this passage because there are so many people dying of heroin overdoses on the west side of Chicago, in Oak Park, and different parts of my district. So the passage of this is very important. And I also want to tell the governor that I think that he could claim a victory for reducing the spending in the state of Illinois as a Republican. Because me as a Democrat, I think that we need to spend more to take care of the people of Illinois, and the governor could take this as a victory by driving down spending in Illinois. And so I urge the governor to take note and to take pride in his hard work of driving down spending in the state of Illinois, and I urge him to support this measure so that we could protect the most vulnerable people in the state of Illinois. It's clear that if we don't pass this, we will be putting ourselves in a penny-wise, pound-foolish state, because we're going to spend more money, and to me, that is not what a conservative governor would want, to spend more money than we need to spend. A conservative governor understands that he doesn't want to waste taxpayer dollars. A conservative governor understands that it's very important that we pass this measure today and end the wasteful spending of taxpayer dollars, because to continue to spend without a budget is exactly what we're doing. We're spending more of taxpayer dollars and we're digging ourselves deeper in a hole. So I urge the governor to recognize victory when there's victory, and I urge all of us to continue to make Illinois better and better by passing this bill, and to continue to work to have a better and more balanced budget in the state of Illinois. I urge a aye vote.
Leader Durkin is recognized.
Thank you. To the amendment. Let's just make sure we know what we're voting on right now. We are voting for an amendment. We are not voting on third reading. But this is a good start. We have about 13 hours left, and I am committed to getting the job done. That means a balanced budget, responsible cuts, and reforms that are going to put Illinois back on track. Now, this chamber, compared to the one on the other side of the building, has been very partisan. There has been a lot of activity, and the tensions have been very high. I understand it. And because of that, there has been a lack of good faith that has permeated this chamber for the past 2 years. Here's my commitment. I am committing to vote for this amendment, and I'm also committing to put Republican votes on this, not just to get passage, but to bring us past 71. And that, to me, is my commitment to you, that we continue with our work today, because I'm telling you, we are close. We are so close, I can taste it. But folks, bear with us. I'm offering you this gesture of good faith that we are prepared to bring this to the final hours to finish this impasse and put Illinois back on track. I am voting yes on this amendment, and let's get back to work.
Representative Senti for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Very briefly, I'd like to address what our constituents have asked us to work on. They've asked us to work on a full year balanced budget. They have asked us to stop kicking the can down the road. They have asked us for cuts. They've asked us for reforms. And they've asked us to address the backlog of bills. They've asked us to compromise and work together. So I just want to say that people do on the outside feel that we are very partisan, and this chamber does not have people who want to work together. So I want to conclude by saying thank you to Greg, thank you to Steve, thank you to Elaine and Sarah and Avery, and my list could go on and on. Thank you to the senators on the other side who did the heavy lifting all session. Thank you to Leader Radogno and President Cullerton. Thank you to the 33 members on both sides of the aisle that signed the statement that asked us to move forward. Thank you for every evening you met. Thank you for every suggestion you had and every time you gave in and said, how about this? How about that? Let's work together. Let's show the world, let's show our state there is more that binds us, and let's continue with the trust of the day and get this done. I just say thank you.
Representative Kifowit for 5 minutes.
Thank you. To the bill first. Again, I'll echo what my colleagues said about Leader Harris and Leader Anderson. Thank you for being available, answering numerous questions, and keeping the information as readily as possible. I do want to address what the member from Palatine said, and I think that we do need to come together and have an economic plan for jobs in this state and a plan to get things going in the right direction. This plan today is a plan to stop the bleeding, start the breathing, but we also have to fix what is wounding Illinois, and I agree, actually, across the aisle, that we do need, and I offer my services and I offer my companionship so that we can get a true, robust economic development plan for Illinois, but we cannot do that without balancing our budget, starting to pay our bills, and getting things going in the right direction. So I think that properly funding our schools, taking care of our children, putting this state in the right direction, ending the impasse is so important and vital for the success of Illinois. And I think from this point going forward, I extend to anybody who wants to work with me that we must also continue to put good Illinois people to work, training programs, higher education, support our businesses, and create jobs as well. So I want to thank him for bringing up that point, and I think that we are in agreement with that as well. Thank you.
Mr. Harris to close.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Before I do my closing, I just want to say two things to two people in the room. To Leader Steve Anderson, you mentioned you're wearing your purple tie because it brings you luck. After being down here so long, I can't say I'm wearing my coral tie because it's the only clean thing I have left. But I also want to say to you, I talked about sort of flowery speeches, and I couldn't think of one to make on the floor. What you said today may have been, in the years I've served here, the finest remarks I've ever heard on the House floor. And I'm so grateful. And to Leader Durkin, for his remarks, maybe we have turned a corner here, ladies and gentlemen, today. Maybe we've turned a corner. And every journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. And we're about to take that one step, and hopefully on issues that are important to us, and important to you, important to the city of Chicago, important to Southern Illinois and Central Illinois and the suburbs, we can continue taking steps to solve all those issues together. Ladies and gentlemen, on this, I would ask for an aye vote, and thank you all very much.
Those in favor of the gentleman's amendment will vote yes. Opposed, no. The voting is open. Have all voted who wish. Have all voted who wish. Have all voted who wish. Please record yourselves, members. Chapel Lavia. Mr. Clerk, please take the record. On this question, there are 90 voting yes, 25 voting no, and the amendment is adopted. Chair recognizes Speaker Madigan.
Mr. Speaker and ladies and gentlemen of the House, first, thank you to Leader Durkin and to the Republicans who voted for the amendment. I think it's a good step forward, a step that we can build upon. There's much work yet to be done. Therefore, the House will be in session tomorrow. Next, momentarily, I will send a message to the bond rating agencies asking them to defer any further opinions relative to the credit rating of the state of Illinois until we've had sufficient time to finalize our budget making. That message will leave momentarily. Next, I will convene a meeting of the leaders today to continue our discussions relative to budget making and non-budget issues. And I will convene a meeting of interested parties on a revenue bill. Much work has already been done on a revenue bill. A bill has been filed, but today we'll convene interested parties in an effort to finalize the revenue bill so we can balance out spending against revenue. Again, thank you for your cooperation on this vote. Much work remains to be done. Let's keep up the good work. We'll get the job done. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk, please hold Senate Bill 6 on the order of second reading.
Next, from the state capitol. As the legislature is in special session in an effort to pass a state budget, we speak with Representative Mary Flowers to get her thoughts on the issues that have held up a passage of a budget and how the growing pressure on lawmakers is affecting the process. This runs about 7 minutes. Representative Mary Flowers, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. We're standing here on the 27th of June. We don't have a budget as yet, but I would say it seems that the pot is percolating. There seems to be some action. The leaders are in the Speaker's office as we stand here. What are you hearing? What are your thoughts? And what does your gut tell you about whether we will or won't have a budget passed before the end of the month?
Well, for the people's sake, I hope we do have a budget. And I would like to say that I'm optimistic, but I've been to this party a few times before. And every time we've thought we've reached some type of agreement, the governor seems to always move the goalposts. So today, he might agree to 4 or 5 items that we're supposed to be discussing, and tomorrow he'll think of a third. I'm often reminded of what the governor said prior to him being elected, and since he's been elected, in regards to crisis and how he loved crisis, and crisis is an opportunity to advocate for structural changes. The governor's been very good at creating this crisis, and he's been very good at hurting a lot of people as a result of these created crises. And it's time for us to stop. It's time for us to do something to help make sure come September the schools are open, make sure that senior citizens are still able to get their prescription drugs, to make sure that there are the property tax freezes, as well as the other things. As we've worked on workman's comp, I hope it's to the governor's liking. You know, everything that he's asked for, we've tried to accommodate him. We've given him 90% of almost everything he's asked for. No one's gotten it.
Can you tell what are some of the things that you've given him that he's asked for?
Well, as far as the property tax freeze, we're working on that, and hopefully I think we do have an agreement. As far as workman's comp, we've given him that.
New changes to work comp? Or do you mean back the changes from several years ago? You're talking about new changes.
New changes. And in regards to education, we've given him that. You know, Senate Bill 1 he still want to find something wrong with that, despite the fact that all the school districts seem to be very happy with it. The governor seemed to be the only one that's unhappy with it.
He didn't like the $215 million payment to the Chicago teachers' pensions.
Right, absolutely, absolutely. And we're working on pension reform. So I don't know what else he is expecting, and if he wants to continue this creative crisis, he's doing a very good job of destroying Illinois. Because if we don't get a budget by June 30th, our rating will go down to nothing, absolutely nothing. And it's going to be very difficult for us to climb out of this hole that he's put us in.
When you go back to your district and talk to your constituents, to what extent are they paying attention to this, and what are they telling you in response?
Well, they are paying attention, and they're tired of it because, how do people move on with their lives? They want to better themselves. They want to get better jobs. They want to have opportunities. But no one is hiring because people are afraid as far as what the governor's going to do. And people, they're kind of at a loss. Should they go to school? Should they register for school? Can they take out a student loan? Will they be able to pay that loan back? Is the state of Illinois going to be worthy of them staying in the state? There's a lot of unanswered questions, and a lot of bills that hasn't been paid. We are so far in debt. Prior to this governor becoming elected, we was $2 billion in debt. Now, in a few short years, we're $17 billion in debt. And what does any of the things that he's been asking for, how does that restructure the debt? How does that bring revenue into the state? How is that creating jobs? How is that getting us out of this hole that we're in? It's not happening. And I don't know what he's expecting and how he's going to fill this $17 billion debt that we're in, because there's no more cuts that we can give to the poor working people of the state of Illinois. None. They've given all that they can give.
As you meet in caucus with your fellow House members, the Democratic caucus, of course, what's the feeling among the caucus? I mean, and is it different than it was, say, a year ago? I mean, this would be like the third year that we haven't had a budget. Has it changed? And if so, how has the attitude changed, would you say?
The attitude has changed. Some of the members was thinking, well, maybe we could give the governor a little bit more. And so they've seen how we've tried to work with the governor. And every time we tried to work with him, again, he moved the goalposts. There's always something else that he's asking for. To ask a person such as myself to create a work zone for the people in my district, while the people in Beverly or DuPage County, they may work and get $25 an hour, and he wants me to vote for a work zone that might pay $10 an hour. That's not what I'm here for. I'm not going to do that. That's not the reason why my constituents voted me in office, to create that disparities, because we do have one state of Illinois. And if that's the best thing that he can come up with, then we're going to be here for a while, because the things that he's asking for is just not, it's not going to work in my district. And I'm here to advocate on behalf of the people of my district as well as the people of the state of Illinois. And no one would want to have that disparity. You cannot make a living off that. You cannot feed your family. You cannot send your kids to college. You cannot pay your mortgages, pay your car note, high gas bills going up, utilities going up. You can't do that.
Mayor Flowers, I hope for all of our sake we get a budget out of this. We appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much. I appreciate you.
Thanks a lot.
Senate Minority Leader Christine Radogno holds a press conference to announce her resignation from the Senate. This runs about 10 minutes.
Let me say first, there's been obviously some speculation about my future plans. So I wanted to walk all of you through what's gone on in my own mind and how I've arrived at this point. I have a 2-year term right now. I have never intended to run again. I'm winding down. I wanted to run this term, though, because we have a lot of new caucus members, and I didn't want them to come in to a caucus and have to elect a leader when they didn't know anyone. And so we've had a good time to allow all the caucus members to get to know who the other members are, so that when they do have the transition, and I can tell you we are already planning for a speedy, smooth, and expeditious transition because everybody knows the members, they're known quantities. So when I began the session, I became involved, as you know, with Senator Cullerton on the grand bargain, which was a very wonderful experience for me, and I think it's had lasting positive consequences for the caucuses and hopefully for the building in general. I will say that I feel strongly that the governor has the right agenda, but it's not that easy getting there. We need fundamental change in this building, but we need to compromise in order to get there. So I became involved in the grand bargain, and it was my initial hope that my natural break point would be sending that grand bargain over to the House. As you all know, that didn't happen. But I wanted to continue and stay and try to get a resolution because I understand the state's in a very difficult spot. So I decided to stay until May 31st. Obviously, then we flipped into special session, but there were still discussions going on, and I thought the next natural break is the end of the fiscal year. The end of the fiscal year is here, and I'm not sure that there's another natural break coming anytime soon. I feel positive about the work that I've done. I feel positive about all the efforts that have been put in by the governor, by all four leaders. Every single person has contributed, I think, to where this state, I hope, goes eventually. But the fact of the matter is, I'm ready to focus on my personal life. I don't think it's any secret if you follow my Facebook page. I have 5 of the most adorable grandchildren you could ever imagine. My husband and I both have good health and resources to be able to travel, and I don't want to be one of those people that wakes up and wishes I had gone earlier. So this is a natural break, and as I said, my biggest concern is that we have a good, speedy, orderly transition, and that whenever this is resolved, whether it's tomorrow night, and I'm still not giving up hope, and I'm going to put every ounce of effort into it between now and the time I walk out of this building, or whether it's next week or next month, I wish everybody involved, especially the people of Illinois, success, and that we can get back on track and become, once again, the great state that we have the potential to be. So, any questions?
Christine, can you just dispel any thoughts that you might be leaving because the grand bargain fell apart, or, as was reported widely, that the governor withdrew votes from that bargain that you had worked very hard on, and maybe left you feeling out on a limb?
No, I can dispel that unequivocally. I was disappointed. That was sort of my first, this would be a natural break if we could get that over to the House. It didn't happen. That was my motivation, I would have been gone then. I really wanted to continue to try to deal with the hand we've been dealt and try to get to a place where we had the agreement. I think we are getting there. We're still meeting today, but no, that is not true.
Did you announce this to the leaders in advance, and how did they react?
I did tell the leaders, and they were all wonderfully gracious. I even got a hug from Mike Madigan. Maybe he's glad to see me go. No, I don't think so. But the caucus as well was I told them they better stop because I might stay if they keep it up. So it's been very positive, and it's time. I've really tried hard. It's time for someone else to take the reins.
Leader, you've got 22 in your caucus now, and I think the House has 47. How do you think the party is poised to build on that and maybe take a majority?
Well, it's going to be a tough political year. But every year is a tough political year. So I think it's too early to say that for certain. The political environment is not entirely set just yet.
Well, you answered Derek's question earlier about the grand bargain falling apart not being the key to your decision to leave, but it seems to me there were a lot of times, or sometimes back there, when the president said there's only one Republican vote and it's Leader Radogno's, where your caucus and the governor just kind of let you run on the field by yourself. I mean, you can't deny that, can you?
Well, I mean, the point was, that's not the reason I'm leaving. I mean, you know, the point is to get the votes to pass something that can move us forward.
Do you have a favorite for who will take your place, either in your legislative seat as well as for being minority?
Honestly, I don't have a favorite. We have many capable people. I don't even know for sure. As I said, we have a process in place. We should be finding that out pretty quickly.
What is the timeline? What does quickly mean?
Well, you know, we are going to be meeting again today to at least identify who's out there, but the caucus is all committed to an orderly transition, and our caucus is in a great place right now. So I'm confident it will be smooth.
Will you still attend leaders' meetings between now and Saturday?
Yes.
You will not be here on Saturday, yes, you're done regardless.
End of business day. So, and you know, there's some ministerial things that need to be done. So in the event that a leader's not elected, I will fulfill that, but I will be fully engaged.
How frustrating, let me just follow up with that. How frustrating has this whole bargaining process been for you?
Probably about as frustrating as it's been for everyone. You know, there's a lot of frustration out there. We need to keep our eye on the prize, and that is getting a budget and reforms that can move our state forward.
Does that happen before midnight tomorrow?
I don't know. I literally don't know. We are meeting. We met this morning. It was a very good meeting. We made some progress.
As somebody who's in the room, what is the hang-up? Is it personality differences that several people speculate about?
I mean, there are significant policy differences that the two sides have. You know, and different people have different personalities. You know, if I'm going to toot my horn for 1 second, I think one of the things that's helped me is the ability to approach people where they're at. And I'm not sure that always happens, but, you know, that's been my experience.
Does that include the governor?
Includes everybody. It includes my staffers.
Forgive me for even asking this, but we all know that you suffered a great personal tragedy in your own life 2 years ago. To what extent did that change your whole approach to government and for lack of a better word, is your heart in this?
Well, no, as you may know, my daughter was on the Hill, so politics was really important to her. So, no, it doubled down my interest in it. But it did give me the perspective that nothing's forever. And I don't want to be squandering my life with my husband and my grandkids and my other daughters. We only all have a certain amount of time, and that experience told me that's for sure.
You and your husband are going to be retirees, both?
We're both going to be retirees.
Where are you going to live?
Well, Woodridge. Yeah, visiting my other grandchildren.
Will you still be active in the party at all?
I don't know. I mean, I really haven't even thought about that. I just want to take a breath and not be living out of my suitcase for a little bit.
What advice are you giving the people who are going to be still in this building, probably trying to get a deal done after July?
To emphasize again the critical nature of doing this, and we have to put aside personalities. We have to prioritize what we want. Nobody gets 100%, but you know, what do you absolutely have to have? I mean, when you negotiate, you need to understand and get in the skin of the person you're talking to. And so that's my advice to them.
So do you think the governor gets that?
Well, I'm sure he does. I mean, he's been successful in business, so.
But as we know, business and political climate.
They don't always completely meld. Right.
Would it be helpful, Senator, if the governor was in the room?
You know, we have a lot of history, and, you know, I think that right now we're making some progress, and the governor's happy with the progress we're making, so I'd say we stay the course.
What did he have to say about your stepping down?
They've been aware that this is something that I was thinking about.
You're the first female leader
Last question.
of the Illinois General Assembly. Is that something that you'd like to see carried on?
I would be happy to see another woman, and I'm sure at some point you will. Maybe my successor will be. I have no idea. To me, though, it's an asterisk in my career. It's one that I'm proud of, but it's not one that defines me.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Illinois Channel salutes our advisory council members, leaders in business, education, law, medicine, and other fields from across Illinois.
Hi, I'm Linda Brookhart, Executive Director of the State Universities Annuitants Association. Founded in 1971, the State Universities Annuitants Association is the only advocacy organization focusing solely on pension and health care benefits for the participants and beneficiaries within the state university's retirement system. We advocate for both active workers as well as retirees. The number of individuals are well over 200,000. As an association, we work hard to keep our members informed of possible changes in the law that may impact their pensions, their health care, and their general well-being. There is no other association working to keep individuals informed on issues that matter. This is the one reason we're also proud to support the work of the Illinois Channel. Its focus is to keep all Illinoisans informed of the issues that affect them, whether in state government or of significant changes in the private sector. The Illinois Channel's in-depth, unedited coverage of legislative events, policy discussions, interviews with lawmakers, university presidents, and business leaders keep you informed on the issues that affect your life and the future of Illinois. I'm Linda Brookhart with the State Universities Annuitants Association. I watch the Illinois Channel, and I hope you do too. The Illinois Channel, it works for all of us.
As members of the legislature meet in Springfield during a special session to pass a state budget, one of the key issues is Governor Rauner's efforts to have property taxes lowered. Next, we talked to State Representative Jeannie Ives about her efforts to fix flaws in the system of assessing property values for taxation. This runs about 15 minutes. Jeannie Ives, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. And as we are standing here, the leaders of the four caucuses are coming out from having discussions. Senator John Cullerton just said that he was optimistic that they may be close to a budget deal. One of the key components that the governor has asked for has been the property tax, and having everyone knows Illinois' property taxes are so high compared to other states, and the governor wants to put a freeze on those. What's been bandied about is somewhere between 2 to 4 years. It looks like it may be 4.
Okay.
We wanted to talk to you because you have been talking about an issue that we want to get more details on this. How are the property values assessed? And I think you think there's some flaws in that system. Can you tell us what is it that you would like to have the state do that we are not currently doing?
Well, so I have been working on this issue in terms of valuation and proper assessments for about 3 years now, and put together a task force, but did not file legislation on a task force to look how we do assessments. Did not file that until this year. I filed the bill in February, and then what did we discover in June? The Chicago Tribune came out with an incredible trilogy of stories about how assessments in Cook County particularly are not done in an equitable way. Now, if you talk to any assessors around the state, they knew that this was happening. They knew that that you had an inordinate number of property tax appeals in Cook County, that they were very far in terms of their coefficients of dispersion, which is how accurate are their assessments. They had really high numbers in that relative to the rest of the state. So we knew that we needed to tackle this idea of how are assessments done. You can't, there's no reason to do it anymore with paper and pen, shove it into a drawer where nobody knows what you're doing on it. There's no mystery in it. There's ways to do this with computerized modeling. And so the task force that I put together with Warren Dixon, who is the Naperville Township assessor, is a task force that's good for everybody in the state. And it really gets to the heart or the base of when we are doing property taxes. Since we do have the highest property taxes, or we compete with New Jersey every year who's got the highest property tax, but we have one of the highest. And so since we do have that and we have an over-reliance on funding our schools that way, at least we have to be fair about how we're doing that assessment process. That's what my task force is about. It's now HJR 69, and it's a task force that would be bipartisan. And actually, I have bipartisan sponsors on this task force. It's not really political in nature. It's just getting to the heart and the foundation of valuing property properly. And that's what my task force is about.
Where do we stand in that process in coming out with a report and making this happen?
Well, the initial bill that I filed was HR 139, and it was improperly labeled. It should have been an HJR. So that initial bill was thrown into subcommittee in revenue. And bills thrown into subcommittee are meant to die in subcommittee. They're not meant to move anywhere. So I have talked to the chairperson of Revenue Committee about my new House Joint Resolution 69, and he said that he would honestly try and get it out of Rules Committee and get it through his committee. So we'll see how far I get in that process. I know Senator Connolly has filed a similar bill in the Senate, a Senate Joint Resolution. We think this task force, though, is important for every single property owner in the state, just so that you have assurances that you're not being gamed by a system that is essentially extracting a lot of wealth from you in the form of the highest property taxes in the nation.
Well, and interestingly, if I understand the Tribune article, one of the things that was happening is that they were undervaluing, not overvaluing some of the property, at least in Cook County, if I have that right. And then, so would you be saying that by doing it the way you're talking about, by modernizing this, using more of the computer modeling, as you said, we would be taking the politics out of it and just going with an economic model?
Yeah, well, that's exactly what we're trying to get to the root of, because if you read the trilogy of articles again, they also specifically talked about how minority communities and the poor community, those who are some of the poorer communities, were really getting hurt with some of the largest assessments in terms of tax rates, because they didn't have the wherewithal or the knowledge about how to appeal their property taxes. They just kept paying and paying. And especially on the west side of Chicago, they had definitely examples back there, and really South Suburban Cook. You have property tax rates that are approaching 10%. That's usury. That means that every 10 years you're paying for your property and property taxes. It's outrageous. People can't afford it. You are pushing the poor and minority folks out of home ownership, and so there's a big disparate impact here on minority communities, and we have to address this. They, I think, have cause for a civil rights action, actually, considering how maligned they've been in this system.
Well, we also, as we have property values to where people, or property taxes, I should say, so high, that in many instances the property tax is nearly as much as the mortgage payment, and that has crept up over time. But we're putting younger people at a disadvantage of trying to live in Illinois and buy a home, aren't we? I mean, because we have a system that is over-relying on paying education through local property taxes instead of more of a general tax. Is that fair to say?
Oh, that's more than fair to say. Certainly the state is not picking up its share of responsibility. We're not at 50% of the school funding. In my district, only 9% of the funding for education comes from the state. The rest is picked up mainly by the property tax owners. 73% of my property tax bills goes straight to the schools. So, and actually my school is spending at less than the state average for education, so it's not like they're spending an inordinate amount of money on education. It's just that we don't get hardly anything from the state, because the state knows that we've got some property wealth behind our schools, and so they fund us less. So you're extracting wealth from people, and every time you're doing that, you're actually, when they go to sell their price, the price of their property is getting discounted for the property taxes that somebody else would have to pay.
And the other thing I would point out, just to point out the obvious, when you pay a property tax, you're paying that irrespective of your ability to pay. whereas if we pay an income tax, it's based upon the amount of income that you have. Even with a flat tax, you're paying less if you earn less. Right?
Yes, so those on a fixed income, seniors specifically, have a very difficult time to paying an escalating property tax, no matter what exemption you were to give them. It's really hurting people's ability to do anything else. We have seniors that come to our assessor every day saying, look, I can't afford to stay, I can't afford to leave. What do I do?
Has there been, let's hope that we get a budget here. Yeah. Has there been, to what extent is there a growing awareness and maybe political movement to go back and look at what some other people have suggested, the tax swap, that we can lower property taxes if we fund education more through a general tax, whether it's sales, combination of sales, income, where we would raise income tax but then lower the property taxes, which others have argued would be more fair to some of those communities where it's in agriculture areas with less density of buildings to tax, and poor, as you alluded to, some of the poor neighborhoods around the state where the property values are low.
So that's a big discussion. That, you know, doing a property tax swap with income, I know that that's always been discussed before. There's no doubt. Over time, Illinois has to pick up a bigger share of the cost for education, and I agree with that. I don't know that you can easily put into a tax swap a bill. That's not an easy thing to do. The best thing that we could do, really, is to control costs that drive up the cost of government at the local level. We have got to give these people collective bargaining reform, pension reform, third-party contracting.
School districts.
Yes, school districts, municipalities that are paying pensions, they all need bigger reform. But then after that, the biggest thing we can do is we can grow our commercial and business base. We have got to have these business reforms that Governor Rauner keeps talking about. If you grow your tax base, you'll find that EAV gets spread, or that levy gets spread across a greater EAV base, and you won't have people getting taxed out of their homes so much. In fact, in 2006, the property tax base for business and commercial was about 40% of the EAV came from business commercial. Now it's 33%. Well, what happens? Those levies never stopped growing. They grew during that time frame, and every time they grew, the amount that government levied against that tax base went to the residential property owner who couldn't afford it. You grow the tax base, and you can start to grow this problem out of existence. Additionally, you grow the tax base, and you get those income taxes coming in. You can funnel more money through the education formula to districts and force them to tampen down their levies at the school. So it's the chicken and the egg approach. Which one do you come first? And the best thing that we can do in Illinois, we have to grow our business tax base. Must do that. We can't do anything else, and we must reduce government costs. The cost of doing government is inordinately high. Those two things have to happen before we discuss anything else.
And the one thing I would say, and I know you got to go in it, but we talked about it, the 4-year tax cap. If we cap increases in property taxes for 4 years, people would have said that's going to hurt municipal government because their pension payments are going up, and that means we're going to be freezing their revenue stream while their costs go up. Same thing with schools. It's going to hurt schools and local government. So to that end, and I guess to go back to an earlier question, should we be taking, and is the legislature maybe after this long, prolonged budget battle saying, you know, it's not enough just to cap something. We need to really rewrite this tax code and to look at that. Let's get this budget, but then let's look at rewriting this tax code so that we can straighten the ship and figure out what we're actually doing to bring both equity as well as fiscal stability.
Sure. So, you know, I wouldn't call myself an ideologue. I'll move on policy where it makes sense to move on policy. I have a hard time voting for policy that makes things worse or doesn't solve the problem. And I'll tell you what, the idea of talking about a property tax freeze was always the wrong moniker. They really needed to talk in terms of property tax relief, and quite frankly, that's why in the last couple days you see some of the leaders talking more and using the word relief instead of a freeze. Here's why. Because You can't, right now, the way that the legislation is written, all you're doing is freezing the government's levies. You're not freezing anybody's individual taxes. In fact, in the pension bills that are being proposed right now, pension is outside of the levy, debt is outside of the levy. Additionally, if you, they've got all these exemptions put in there for now people on SSI, veterans, seniors. None of them means tested. SSI is obviously because by its nature it is. The other ones, none of them means tested. Anytime you add to the exemptions amount, the people who aren't getting those exemptions are going to have more of that levy spread to their value of the homes. I know I'm talking a lot. This gets very difficult, but it's really important for people to understand.
You're basically saying you're taking
freeze isn't a freeze, and they're getting
that kind of a freeze with Swiss cheese freeze. It means you're going to have fewer people to tax, or you're going to have to tax them more have the same revenue.
That's right. In my district, when the Michelle Mussman bill passed, HB 156, I was the only no on it. She added in a bunch of exemptions to people, and I knew it was a bad deal. Sure enough, I was vindicated by the Daily Herald in their seminal article, front page headline article about how that deal did nothing for the people in my district. In fact, that deal would have raised the property taxes on the average homeowner in my district, because when you carve out all these exemptions for folks, everybody else who actually doesn't get one of them is going to pay more and more and more. And a freeze isn't a freeze again, so people need to get that out of their head right now. And I hope everybody hears this interview now, because a freeze is not a freeze. The only thing that we can do to really hold down costs, if we wanted to, is be a flat-out cap against your value. And unless you have a taxable event, it doesn't ever increase. That's what they've done in other states. Can Illinois get there right now? Not right now. Over time, maybe.
Jeannie Ives, we touched on some issues. It does get to be somewhat complex, but you did a pretty good job of explaining it to us, and we appreciate it.
Thank you so much. All right.
Hi, I'm Jim McNamee, President of the Illinois Public Pension Fund Association. Since 1985, we've worked to educate the public and those who serve as trustees and pension boards about issues that impact the financial health of publicly funded pensions. Our members manage over $18 billion in pension assets. That's a huge number. But we never forget those dollars belong to the men and women who've worked as firefighters, police officers, and as educators. We want them to know that their pension dollars are safely invested. They also want to know that someone will keep an eye on legislation that could threaten their pension. And that's why the Illinois Public Pension Fund Association is fighting against laws that would reduce the pensions earned by our members. And this is why we support the work of the Illinois Channel. Their unbiased, in-depth coverage of the pension reform issue allows us and our members to hear arguments on both sides of the pension issue, to follow legislation as it moves through committee, or to hear unedited interviews with key lawmakers as they discuss what changes are being considered. Pensions are very important. They're also very complex. Pension reform can't adequately be covered in sound bites. But the Illinois Channel provides a connection to the Capitol, the governor, and lawmakers that we all need to stay on top of key issues. Hi, I'm Jim McNamee, President of the Illinois Public Pension Fund Association. I watch the Illinois Channel, and I hope you do too.
We sit down with John Carpenter, the president and CEO of the Choose DuPage Economic Development Alliance, about the growth in jobs and industry throughout DuPage County. This runs about 30 minutes.
John Carpenter, thanks for joining us on the Illinois Channel. It's been a while since we've had a chance to get together. And as we are here in DuPage County, and you are the CEO of Choose DuPage, so much of what we hear about Illinois these days seems to be negative, but of course, as you go around the state, there's any number of positive stories. I think DuPage County and the economic development up here is one of those, and we wanted to touch base with you on some of the things that are making DuPage successful, what projects you're working on. So let me give you an opening. Just what's the big picture here of economic development in DuPage and what's working?
There are lots of inherent advantages in DuPage County to doing business here and to living here. We have excellent schools. Schools are a big reason many people move here. We have an incredible infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, the ability to get anywhere in the region, anywhere within the Midwest within several hours drive. We have railroads, Class A railroads, O'Hare Airport, plenty of advantages to doing business here as well. We have an educated and trained workforce. 50% or so of our residents have college degrees or greater. 92% have high school degrees or greater. It's a well trained, well-educated workforce, and it's a good place to live and work.
So over the last few years, and of course, let's just bring it to we've had the political standoff that's been going on for several years. To what extent is that a factor? I mean, we're far away from Springfield, but does that factor in when you're trying to reach out and work on economic development?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It makes Illinois a less desirable place to relocate if you're not in Illinois already, and it makes it a less desirable place to stay if you're already here. We are challenged. There are a lot of companies looking to grow and expand and relocate their operations. Unfortunately, until things settle down and we get our financial house in order, fewer and fewer companies are stopping here while they're looking for places to relocate or expand. We are doing most of our effort is into keeping companies here, helping companies grow that are here already and want to stay here. A lot of companies want to stay here for a lot of reasons. There's always going to be some premium paid for doing business in this region. We've got excellent Class A research universities. We've got excellent transportation infrastructure. We are geographically desirable. Either coast is several hours away. So you will pay a premium for some of the amenities that Illinois and northeastern Illinois has to offer, and particularly DuPage County. But until other problems are solved, we aren't going to be able to fully exploit the advantages that we have.
I know one of the things you and I had talked about is the importance of O'Hare Airport.
Right.
And I think as I say that, I mean how Boeing has moved their headquarters from Seattle to the Chicago area.
Right.
Not DuPage, but the Chicago area, because they wanted to be more centrally located. Exactly. They wanted their executives to be able to get in and out quickly. Mm-hmm. How much of an advantage is that for DuPage County to have O'Hare there?
Oh, it's an unmatched advantage. Considering we are on the western side of the airport and that meaningful western access is moving forward, will be realized within a few years, that puts DuPage County in an excellent position. We will have the same access to the airport that every city, municipality has on the east side of the airport. The people that live here today, the companies that operate here today, will no longer have to go all the way around the airport and get funneled in from one front door. There will be two front doors to O'Hare Airport in the not-too-distant future, and DuPage County is sitting on that doorstep.
You and I have known each other for several years. You, in the past, before I knew you, actually, you worked with the airlines at American, as I understand.
Correct, right.
You had worked when we first met with the Chicagoland Chamber of Commerce. Now you're doing what you're doing here in DuPage. So the point is you have a wealth of knowledge from all your background of that economic development issues. And as you talk to people, and we're here in a beautiful office park, and I would say for those who haven't driven around DuPage, there's really some very charming little communities that people live in with charming little downtown areas, right, with restaurants and places to go. How has your efforts, and how long have you been here with the DuPage?
It'll be 2 years this coming fall, this September.
I guess what I'm shooting for is what's the trend line over your years of working in economic development, let's say for the last 10 years, if you can say that.
I think the trend line is that DuPage County's attractiveness is becoming more and more obvious. We have nearly 30 metro stops in DuPage County with incredible capacity going east and west, inbound, outbound. So it is now possible, if you choose to live someplace outside of DuPage County, if you want to work here, it's a convenient connection. If you work in downtown Chicago, DuPage County is an attractive place to live. We have excellent schools, excellent transportation infrastructure, and charming downtown areas. We are seeing more and more transit-oriented development taking place, apartments, townhouses for either millennials, young single people, or empty nesters. Have the ability to live in a downtown area with good restaurants, good entertainment, beautiful amenities, and be able to be downtown in 20 or 25 minutes on a train.
When you talk about millennials, are they a different crowd when you try to attract them, or businesses try to attract them? And if so, how are they different than, let's say, our generation of workers?
I think that our generation took a job with the intention of staying there for 30 years. I don't think we see that same kind of loyalty today. People move around, they're more mobile, they're more less committed to an employer. I think that we also see, we hear a lot about the trying to attract the millennial talent in downtown Chicago and companies moving there for that reason. I don't completely buy that argument or that story. I think that many companies are going downtown not to attract the talent as much as it is to cut costs. They may have a younger, less experienced workforce who will come in at a lower place in the salary scale. They also may have fewer, more expensive square footage, but have many fewer square feet. So I think we have to be honest. There's millennial talent in DuPage County. We are gaining about 1,000 millennial tech jobs, 1,000 tech jobs a year in DuPage County. So millennial talent is here. With the commuter operations that we have, and with the mobility the ability we have to commute in DuPage County, there's no reason they can live downtown and work out here. That's not a big deal. So I think that the workforce is different. Everything we see is that the millennials will buy later if they buy housing. They aren't committed to owning a car necessarily. They want to spend money on other things. But I think when they start raising families, they will be doing so in the city for a couple of years. But when the second child comes along, I don't think they're reluctant to pay tuition, just like they're reluctant to pay a mortgage or a car payment. They'll come out here for the schools. The schools in DuPage County are unmatched, unparalleled excellence in DuPage County, and every parent wants their child to be well educated, and DuPage County is the place to do it.
When you talked about mobility, and people nowhere want to sit in traffic. I used to work in the Washington, D.C. area, and it would take an hour and a half to go 25 miles. Right. I mean, you could literally read the newspaper while you were sitting in traffic. To what extent, as compared to living here and working downtown Chicago, which I think you're going to be hitting those traffic jams, to what extent can you attract businesses? As I look out the window at different office buildings here, and it's well developed, how much of a sales point is that to say, look, build your businesses here, and your workforce is not going to be spending hours a day in traffic, which is a high stress factor on anyone.
Well, and it cuts into productivity as well.
Right.
Time spent behind a wheel is not nearly as productive as it is behind a desk. And we think that with the amenities that we have in DuPage County, that it's an easy sell. The suburbs are quite strong. I think we noticed that with the move of Caterpillar to Lake County, Illinois. DuPage County was being considered at the same time. There are advantages to being in DuPage County. We're close to O'Hare. If you're in the transportation, logistics, or distribution business, our interstate highway network is unmatched. Quality of life is high, and I think it's a trend like anything else. It's a pendulum which swings back and forth. We're every bit as confident as we always were that DuPage County is a good place to do business, and we're seeing corporate relocations here as well.
And you still are seeing that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was going to say, when everyone has challenges, what challenges are you facing and trying to address?
Well, the challenge that we face is this misconception out there that you have to be downtown to attract the talent. That's not true. There are 19 colleges and universities with operations in DuPage County. We have a highly educated workforce. You don't have to be downtown to attract that kind of talent. Their talent is out here. So part of it's a perception problem, and we're trying to change that perception.
And when we, taking it back to Springfield, I often tell people, the Illinois Channel, of course, covers a lot of state government issues, but I often make the point that public policy issues don't start and stop under the Capitol dome. They're out places like here, and they have to be addressed in Springfield. The governor's made a big point on property taxes. When you're working on your economic development issues, how big of a factor is that?
Well, it's a cost of doing business, and it's something that employers and corporations and companies consider when making those decisions. We in DuPage County don't raise taxes or impose taxes just to abate them, so we don't have a big financial incentive package. We think that our commercial property, industrial property tax rates are comparable or favorable compared to anybody in the state. We are confident that we make a good argument that you ought to be working, living, and playing in DuPage County because of our tax environment. We have a lot of leadership here in DuPage County, great leadership in DuPage County. Business and government work together. Under the leadership of Dan Cronin, our county board chairman, we have seen taxes actually reduced and eliminated. So he is committed to his ACT proposal, which is accountability. I forget the acronym right now. You recall what it is? Time out, right?
Sure.
It's accountability, consolidation, and transparency. Dan Cronin's ACT initiative, accountability, consolidation, and transparency, says a lot about the administration here and a lot about the government here. Businesses appreciate that. It's a strong contrast to many other places in the state. So because of that, and because of our conservative tax policies, companies prosper in DuPage County.
You know, another factor that obviously over the last 20 years, the big game changer has been the whole development of the internet. And as it's been rolled out, I mean, we certainly remember it wasn't that long ago that we had dial-up access to the internet, but now we've got the broadband. And one of the key features for economic development for corporations often is what's the connectivity. When you, to what extent is that a factor? I mean, as you go around and talk to businesses, how important do you hear that from them?
I think it's a competitive issue, and I think we're ahead of the game right here. There has not been an issue. The fact that it's not an issue, I think, is a statement for DuPage County. We've got 2 national laboratories in DuPage County. There are 17 in the entire country, 2 in DuPage County. I think that the technology knowledge and the technology competitiveness in DuPage County is as strong as it is anywhere else.
And obviously the interesting thing is with the factor that we can, you know, it used to be that all commerce was local, and now with that connectivity, we can be located increasingly almost anywhere and be dealing, depending upon what it is you're selling,
right.
or with people around the world, right?
Exactly. I think that in DuPage County, that has not been an issue. It's not something I've heard of. So to me, we are competitive with any place in the country, or the world,
or have the advantage over maybe other places that
right.
are. When we're talking about commuting, and I know you have a program that's I think in the development stage, but it might be something that's of interest to other places. What's it called? The DASH program?
Innova Dash Cards. It is part of. We do a lot of things that a lot of other economic development organizations throughout the state do. We do all the site selection work. We meet with developers. We work with the real estate industry. We're always trying to attract companies to come to DuPage County. For the first year or so, that's primarily what we focused on. My first year, that's what we focused on. After a year of being here, it occurred to me that there are some sweet spots for DuPage County that we really need to focus on to make us even more competitive and more desirable place to live and work. It became known as our 4-point plan. One of those points is solving the last mile, first mile commute dilemma that many employers and employees face. The first mile, last mile commute means in areas where you haven't got a density like you do in Cook County, where there's 24-hour bus services in some neighborhoods every 10 or 20 minutes, we can't support that kind of service here in DuPage County. There isn't enough density, which is an advantage and a disadvantage. But to solve the problem, we've worked with a company called the Innova EV, electric vehicle. To solve the first mile, last mile commute, we had to look at a couple different options to solve the problem. And these options, these solutions range from low tech to high tech. Low tech means putting sidewalks in some neighborhoods. Mid tech is working with a bicycle sharing company, which is tailored specifically for suburban areas and college campuses. High tech is Innova EV. As I said earlier, we've got incredible capacity for commuters to come into the county and to go out of the county, to commute downtown or commute from downtown out here. Nearly 30 Metro train stops. When you get to that train stop, how do you get that last mile? Maybe it's a mile and a half, maybe it's 3/4 of a mile, but it's become known as the last mile, first mile.
So someone takes that train in, it's
right.
another mile to their office.
Without 10-minute bus service around the clock, it's a problem. For some of the industrial sites in the county where there's carpooling that takes place, for example, if one person changes jobs or gets a promotion or a different shift, 4 people are out of work or can't get to work. So we've come up with a solution with a partner, a DuPage County company based in Burr Ridge that operates high-tech electric vehicles, zero emissions, on a couple different platforms. Either it's a zip car type model where you reserve the car, you drive it, run your errands, come back, drop it off, you know where it's going to be parked. Or it's a divvy type model where you reserve, the bike is there, you get in, and you go, the car, you get in, you go. These are platforms for technology. So if a person's on the train coming from Ogilvy Center or from Union Station, they reserve their seat by the app on their phone, the car's waiting there for them. Its optimum use is somewhere around 2 miles or so, and it's about 60% cheaper than Uber or Lyft. It's phenomenal. It's getting a lot of attention. We are presenting at the Association for Commuter Transportation in New Orleans in August on the pilot project that we've got going here in DuPage County. We're doing a pilot project at the Itasca Metro Station, going between Itasca Metro Station and Hamilton Lakes Development, office development. There's about 100 users there already. It's been in operation for less than a year. We see it growing. And with 30 stops in DuPage County, there's a lot of upside potential for this, and people seem to love it.
So how long has that been going on now?
Since the end of last year, beginning of this year.
And you're obviously taking some kind of feedback, I guess, from users and
a lot
positive feedback?
Very positive. This has taken a lot of stress out of people's lives, not knowing, in the summertime you don't want to ride a bicycle to your work, in the wintertime you don't want to ride a bicycle to your workplace. If you've got this car waiting for you.
And you don't want to take a cab because you end up spending $10 to go the last mile.
And you end up waiting for one. This is something which attracts the millennials as well. It's an unmatched convenience. They love flexibility. Now, I hate to generalize, but generally speaking, flexibility and convenience are big factors in their decision-making process. You can't get any more convenient than this. You're on a train, you use your phone, the car's waiting for you. Currently, it's 2 passengers. It's growing to 4 passengers next, and it could be 6 or 8 going forward. It could be autonomous sometime this year if they choose it to be. They choose it to be. So it's a breakthrough in solving the last mile, first mile commute dilemma that we've been facing forever, it seems. We have 3 lines coming into DuPage County, and every one of those train stations has a problem with getting that last mile to home, from home to the station, or vice versa, or from the station to work.
It's fascinating. I'd like to hear more as we go forward, how it's working out, because there's so many times where people, they don't want the cost of just driving their own, or just the stress of driving, as we said, in traffic. So every person you can get to take that train ride in, and then you have an answer for that last mile, you're taking a car off the road.
Precisely. And you're increasing productivity, because that time spent on a train is work time, generally speaking. We see it as an answer to a lot of people's prayers, that they're able, this simplifies life at low cost. There's not much to complain about here.
As we sit here and the camera looks behind you, it's seeing trees, it's wooded. We have a lake out there, so it's almost interesting that the way this area is being developed, when we think back to the industrial parks of the 1950s, it was all about functionality. You didn't think in terms of having a workplace where it was also like living in or working in a park area. Why is that important? It's obviously planned, and to what extent do you get feedback from people as far as where do they value that or not?
Well, we did a poll. It's not a poll, it's a survey. We did about a year ago with one of our members, JLL, Jones Lang LaSalle, on employee preferences. We pushed it out. It wasn't a scientific poll necessarily, but we wanted to do a survey of what people think and feel. We found that a lot of people in DuPage County like what they're doing. They like where they're working. It's close to home. They wish there were some more options for this or for that. But for the most part, satisfaction levels were very, very high. We see, this is a very diverse county, more diverse than you think it might be. In the northern part of the county, there's a lot more manufacturing, industrial sites. In the northwest part of the county, you see a cluster developing around food, processing, and distribution. It's a big county, nearly 1 million people here, second biggest county in the state, with a very diverse economy. We have focus on healthcare, Northwestern, Central DuPage, Elmhurst, Edward, Advocate, Adventist, a lot of hospital operations here. Rush has just opened a new spot. It broke ground last month in Oak Brook in DuPage County for a facility. So that's one of the clusters that's developing. I think because the people are here, the concentration of people is here, and the demographics in terms of the ability to spend and to buy and to consume is strong. So we see shopping is a big industry here. But the biggest industries we've found so far are manufacturing, that you'd be surprised at. These are small operations, relatively small operations, 200 employees. Some of them are running 3 shifts a day, 5 or 6 or 7 days a week, producing parts for companies like Boeing or Caterpillar in little machine shops in DuPage County. Food distribution and processing is a big industry here in DuPage County, as is healthcare and education. So it's a lot of different. Nothing is the same all over the county. It's very diverse.
What's interesting to me, when you look at a county like DuPage, and you said it's about 1 million population, Do you know offhand what the economy is in terms of dollars, roughly, of DuPage County? Because what I would guess that your economic impact is as great as some states when you compare it to a Wyoming or some of these areas, and it's easy to overlook how important a DuPage County is to the part and parcel of the economy of the country.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
But as we are sitting here, and you're always looking to have more people bring their businesses here.
Correct.
It seems sometimes when you drive around, that it's fairly developed. You have areas where you can still put new businesses?
Well, back to our 4-point plan for economic prosperity here in DuPage County. One of the points in that plan is the development of the DuPage Business Park. The DuPage Business Park is several hundred acres on the western edge of the county, the last large tract of undeveloped land in the county. It's prime real estate for manufacturing, and we hope to make some improvements so that it's a better place even for transportation, logistics, and distribution. It's adjacent to the DuPage County Airport, so if a company has values that access to air transportation, it's a great spot to be. People forget that DuPage County Airport is about the size, its footprint's about the size of Midway Airport, and it's got customs and immigration facilities. No regularly scheduled service, so it's primarily general aviation, private aviation, but it's a jewel in the county that's underappreciated, and its proximity to the DuPage Business Park, I think, makes DuPage Business Park a great place to build, expand, and grow. So that's one of the areas that we're trying to promote here at Choose DuPage, is the value of being located at the DuPage Business Park.
And before we close out, let's go back to what's going on with the state economy and the state budget and all. When you talk to, you mentioned Dan Cronin, who's now the county chief executive officer. He used to be a state senator, so he's intimate with knowledge of what's going on in Springfield. What do you say to your local state reps and senators as far as what they can do that would help you in your quest for economic development?
In addition to doing the things that we'd like to see the legislature do in terms of creating a more business-friendly environment here, we say get a budget. Businesses need a budget. Businesses expect to pay taxes. They know they're going to pay taxes. They don't mind paying taxes. They want to know what that tax is going to be 5, 10 years down the road. General Assembly typically operates in 18-month windows. Businesses can't operate with an 18-month plan. They have to have a 5, 10, 20-year plan. So the predictability of the state's business environment is important to the businesses in the state, and that's something we want to see the state focus on.
One last thing, as I drive up here, and it's fascinating that this is an area where you have 2 national labs, and so many people don't focus on that. You have the Fermi and the Argonne, and I think people may have heard of these, but they really don't know what is their role and what impact are they having, if any, on DuPage County.
It's really very impressive. There are only 17 national laboratories in the United States, and 2 are in DuPage County. We work closely with Argonne. We work with Fermi as well, but Argonne, I think, is something we are working on a more day-to-day basis with, because the products and the ideas and the patents which come out of Argonne National Laboratory are probably 2 or 3 steps away from general marketplace. They have developed the batteries that are in vehicles we see on the road today. What they do is so technical that it's hard for the average person, a layperson, to understand exactly what's coming out of there. So we are looking forward to working with Argonne. They have created their own incubator there. It's called Chain Reaction Innovations. We here at Choose DuPage want to work with the companies that are members of Chain Reaction Innovations to assure that they stay here when they've developed and they go public. We think, and they think, the national labs, that this region, because of Argonne and Fermi, can be similar to the Silicon Valley and Route 128 in Boston. What Route 128 is to Boston and what the Silicon Valley is to San Francisco, Argonne and Fermi can be to the Chicagoland area, and we have them right here in DuPage County, and we need to appreciate that and take advantage of it.
As I understand it, basically we might look at those just to give a kind of a thumbnail sketch of what they do. They're federally funded research facilities, and so that's where we can do that cutting edge stuff that no one business is going to necessarily have the resources to to spend millions of dollars on something that may or may not pan out, right?
Tens of millions of dollars. And the companies that are, Argonne's case is a magnet for high-tech, entrepreneurial-minded companies and individuals. And once those companies, they may be as small as 2 or 5 employees. Once they come here, we want them to stay here. We want them to know that DuPage County and the state of Illinois is a good place to do business. And we hope that they get the same experience from DuPage County as we get from Argonne.
Yeah, I was going to say, you and I can remember growing up, I mean, how the space program, because the federal government had to develop so much new technology to get us to the moon, that the spin-off of that created a vast amount of wealth throughout the country. In fact, the fact that we have our cell phones and so many other things.
And Tang.
And what?
Tang.
Tang, yes. But spun off from that, and I think these two facilities are the same kind of venture.
Their work is at such a high level that we can't appreciate it. We don't understand it. I don't understand it. Not many people do, but they do. And the value that they create is something we need to capture here in DuPage County.
Well, and not just for cars, but you touched on this when you talked about batteries. People may not know that all the electricity we are using in our homes and our factories or businesses was produced a second ago. There's no great way to store electric power.
At Argonne, they refer to it as energy storage. We refer to it as batteries. But their energy storage programs are things that will be commonplace probably within the next decade or so that we can't comprehend today.
Well, and I've talked to enough people to know that is kind of the holy grail, because so much of when we talk about solar power or wind power, the problem is you can't store that, and it's not always. If we develop our storage capacity, it would just be a game changer in a whole lot of areas.
It sure would. It would change the face of the grid.
And it's right here in DuPage.
Yeah, it is.
All right. John Carpenter, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Terry. Appreciate it.
Hi, I'm Dave Treader, President of the Federation of Independent Illinois Colleges and Universities. For years, Illinois was known around the world for the quality of its colleges and universities, and not just our public universities, but the many private schools that do such a great job educating more students annually than the publics. Schools like Bradley University in Peoria, Millikan University in Decatur, Loyola University in Chicago, and Northwestern University in Evanston. These are just a few examples of the schools that not only educate the next generation, but also serve as economic engines for their communities, with tens of millions of dollars in payroll and the purchasing of millions of dollars in local services. In fact, the combined economic impact of Illinois' private colleges and universities is over $20 billion annually. Collectively, these schools account for $3.5 billion in state tax revenues annually. Illinois' independent colleges and universities are a key pillar of the economy, bringing billions of dollars to the Illinois economy, as well as adding a cultural richness to our communities. That's why it's important that the state programs like the Monetary Award Program, which enables low-income Illinois residents to attend college in our great state, remain funded. And it's also why it's important for all of us to understand the economic impact of our colleges and universities have on the Illinois economy and our communities. This is why I'm also happy to serve on the Illinois Channel Advisory Council on Higher Education. Their statewide, in-depth coverage of the issues that impact our economy, our government, and our cultural resources help to inform us all on the issues that matter. I'm Dave Treader, President of the Federation of Independent Illinois Colleges and Universities, and proud to be a member of the Illinois Channel Advisory Council.